Secretary of Homeland Security has not secured our country against terrorism, against fentanyl, against criminal gangs, against traffickers, against sex slavery, against any of it.
Secretary Mayorkas is the architect of the devastation that we have witnessed for nearly 3 years.
This is not a legitimate impeachment.
Mayorkas took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. In my judgment, he has violated that oath.
A dislike of the president's policy is not a basis for impeachment.
It will either be dealt with by this Congress to vindicate the rule of law, or we will surrender rule of law to a rule of man.
All right, even Republicans who were leery of taking this next step to go after and impeach the Homeland Security Secretary are saying that there's enough things that have happened now that warrant such a move, including Congressman Michael McCaul of Texas. He is the House Foreign Affairs Committee chairman, sits on the House Homeland Security Committee itself as well. Congressman, great to have you. So you think the time has come and the justification is there? Explain.
Well, I do. You look at the framers of the Constitution, what they envisioned by impeachment. You know, I referred to Hamilton in the Federalist Papers talking about injuries done to society. Secretary Mayorkas, as the Attorney General said, is the architect of destruction. He has destroyed the fabric of America for the last 2.5, 3 years. As we saw, 8 million people pour in with no legal status, hundreds of thousands of people dying to fentanyl abuse, human trafficking, and hundreds on the terror watch list. Look, I chaired Homeland. I've worked with secretaries in the past. I've never seen it this bad before in my entire career, which goes back to being a federal prosecutor in Texas and also Deputy Attorney General for Criminal Justice. It is just completely out of control. And he did it not by accident, Neil. He did this by design. He's smart enough to know the difference. And now I think the American people are speaking through Congress that we're done. We're fed up with him.
He's also smart enough to know that his boss still likes him and wants him around. And doesn't that make anything you want to do, Congressman, next to impossible?
And, you know, and I get that. And I get asked, what's the Senate going to do? And I just think it's important when I go home to my home state of Texas, this is a #1 issue. And what they want to see is us standing up to this cabinet secretary who has wholly failed in his job. We call it dereliction of duty. The founding fathers said abuse of power or neglect or maladministration is sufficient to impeach. And I think they want their voices to be heard that they don't agree with this man. In fact, they want him to be brought down from power that he has abused so badly. Now, will this take him out of power at the end of the day? Probably not. But I think it sends a strong statement on behalf of the American people.
It might very well, sir, to your point, but I'm wondering, let's say the president says, all right, I'll get rid of the guy and replace him with another guy who's going to do essentially what he's been doing, which is very little to address this incredible surge at the border, that unless the administration changes its tact and approach, that won't change, because then they come back, that is the White House, at you guys, Republicans, to say, you don't want to change that. It's an election year, and this is all about scoring political points. So where are you on this?
Well, I'll take a change in policy right now. It doesn't take more money being thrown down there. It's a change in policy, and I'll give you a good example. The Remain in Mexico, I marked up out of my committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, that basically the Trump administration had said, we're going to detain and remove you to Mexico pending your political asylum claim. And you know what, Neil, that's by law, and this is the law that Secretary Mayorkas is violating, and it worked because they couldn't get into the United States. It ended catch and release, and you didn't have this problem, and the cartels know it very well. If they return to that policy alone, it would change everything. It changes the magnet, the pull force of bringing illegals into the country, and it keeps them outside the United States, pushing the border further out from the United States. So I would take that, if we could negotiate that with the White House, major victory, or Title 42, exemption where they'd have to be removed, detained and removed. And that's the whole key here. I just don't know if this White House has the will to do that.
So let me ask you about where this ultimately then goes, Congressman, because it looks like he doesn't plan to go anywhere. The president's not moving him anywhere, again, for the time being. So the surge continues, and lo and behold, in the middle of this, we have the Mexican president saying, the United States, could help solve this problem by giving us billions of dollars. I think he talked about upwards of $15 to $20 billion to deal with some of the things that they're dealing with to slow the number trying to get to the border. It was kind of out of the blue and left people wondering, you got to be kidding, but what do you think?
Well, President Trump got the Mexican government to agree through projecting strength, and that was tariffs. I question, this president. I'll be going down to Mexico City, by the way, Neil, to meet with the President AMLO of Mexico and presidential candidates to talk to him about the change in policy. They're very transactional. They're going to want something in exchange. I want to go down there to clean up the mess that I think Secretary Blinken and Mayorkas created going down to Mexico, where now we're seeing Mexico not really willing to deal with the problem, but wanting to extort the United States for more money, for lifting of sanctions on Venezuela and Cuba, for God's sakes. This is the wrong path to go down, and I'm going to go down there to meet with their leaders to tell them there is another point of view in the United States.
Chairman, thank you very much. Crazy times. We'll see how that trip to Mexico goes in the meantime. Michael McCaul on all of that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.